CDL Atlanta starts this weekend. You need to know who's looking good, who might not be looking so great, and maybe who you want to bet on. We're giving our full predictions and full evaluations on all the 8 teams that'll be there in Atlanta coming right up. COD fans, good to see you guys back. IHOLDSHIFT. I will say first and foremost, happy Friday. Cheers to that. I'll drink to a happy Friday. But beyond that, I hope you guys enjoyed the premiere of our last video when we were talking about our Draft Buff Fantasy Now episode 2. I quite liked it. I've never used it before, thinking like, it's just a premiere or whatever. I think it's absolutely great. So if you guys are watching this premiere, hey, happy Friday to you. Hope you guys are enjoying your time. Let's dig in. Wait, why am I saying Friday? It's Thursday. This whole video is already scuffed. Let's just dig into it, though. Happy Thursday to you. Hopefully you're ready to go for the weekend, where we're going to be dealing with likely our first ever matchup between Chicago and Atlanta, but it's going to take some time for us to get there. So let's go ahead and get you framed up with the matches that we're expecting to see going into this specific weekend. Of course, it's going to be 2 pools as normal. If you're just tuning in for the first time, this might feel a little bit unfamiliar to you, but it'll be 8 teams in total, each of them separated by group, and the groups will be double elimination bracket. It won't be a true round robin, but the big key that you need to know is you get 2 wins and you're in to the playoff bracket. You get 2 losses and you're out. There is no way that there can be ties. It's going to be one or the other. You either get 2 wins and you're in, or you get 2 losses and you're out. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're going into this weekend. Taking a look at Group A first, you're dealing with London Royal Ravens, the Florida Mutineers, you got Atlanta, and then you also, of course, have Optic Gaming Los Angeles. As they're matching up to each other, you see that right there. London and Florida will be squaring up, and then Atlanta will be going up against Optic Gaming. Going on to the other group before we talk about predictions, just to give you the rundown as far as what teams are here. Minnesota will play Paris. That should be an interesting one. And then the Chicago Huntsmen will play up against the Toronto Ultra. Now, that's under the way, let's go back over and take a look at Group A first. I'm also going to let you know that I'm going to get rid of the bookie's worst nightmare because it's weird to only do it for 4 games. I'll just give you the lines and who I like going into it. Let's talk about the first game up. London going up against Florida. Here are the big keys when you talk about both of these squads. In my power rankings, they're both relatively close to one another. I've got one at 6th, one at 7th. So, when it comes down to it, who do you like where? Personally, in this matchup, I feel the favor has to be inching towards the London Royal Ravens. Now, there's a lot of things to keep in mind when it comes down to it. Both teams very solid at what we've seen so far in Hardpoint. London's 5-3, Florida's 3-1. Search and Destroy, kind of the same game. London is 4-3, Florida is 2-2. Remember back to Minnesota, Florida did both of their games to Game 5. They were able to win one of them against Seattle, lose the other to the Los Angeles Guerrillas. The big difference maker in this matchup, I feel like, will be game number 3, the domination, where Florida has not looked good there yet. Again, only in 2 instances that we've seen. And then the other side of things, the London Royal Ravens have actually looked pretty decent. Again, let's just take back a look at Florida really quickly. They played up against Seattle. They lost the domination, but by 4 points. Then they played LAG, and they lost by about 50. It did not look very good, 171 to 218. The hard points were relatively close all the way through. The search and destroys were either close losses or definitive wins. They got the definitive wins versus Seattle. They lost both versus Los Angeles. Going up against this London squad, here's my big difference maker. They just came out of a 5-game set versus Dallas in which they looked pretty much good all the way through with the exception of the domination. So, where do you tilt your favor? Personally speaking, this game goes 5. And I've got London winning this one, but I've got this one going 5, simply because I can see these teams splitting the hard points, London taking the dom where they have looked better more often than not against teams that are in the same ballpark as the Florida Mutineers. But I do think that London has a slight advantage in the search and destroy. Only a slight one, because I feel a little bit better about Wuskin with the scope than I do with Havoc with the scope, which was the guy that was mostly using it in Minnesota. The only difference maker that I could see potentially coming into play is if Florida finds good favor with both their AR players, because you figure they're probably going to be one of the teams that adapts into the 2M4 meta that we saw a lot of teams trying to play with when we were in London. If you've got Mox and Skies running M4s all the time, I think Pristini and Frosty will have a much better go of it, and Havoc has been solid pretty much all the way through when it comes to running an SMG. So I've got this one going 5, tilting it in favor of the London Royal Ravens, but this is a matchup that I think we won't just see once, we'll see twice, and I think if the odds stay the same, you might be feeling a little bit more favor going to Florida. If you feel better about Florida, take the plus 140. Absolutely. Absolutely you should. It's a minus 165 if you have Florida covering the spread by winning at least 2 maps. Not really worth it there. I don't feel great about taking the plus 120 for London. Currently, again, with them winning a 3-1 or a 3-0, I see this one going 5. And maybe if you're feeling frisky, you bet if there is an over-under that it goes over the limit, which is usually 4 maps. A lot of jargon right there. If you understood it, you did. If you didn't, ask questions in the comments. Let's go to our next matchup, though. Atlanta versus Optic Gaming LA. If you don't tune into this one, I don't think you'll miss much. I've got this one very convincingly going a 3-0. There's no surprise that I've got Optic in my dead last spot when it comes to the power rankings. Yeah, we haven't seen them play in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it was only 2 games that we saw them play, but they were sloppy games, guys. Flat out. The games versus Paris, very, very sloppy. And then, frankly, they kind of got smoked by Chicago with really the exception of the domination. It was about a 7-point game, if I remember back correctly. It was about a 10-point game somewhere in there. But the Paris Legion game with Optic was sloppy all over the place. They took one search and destroy convincingly. They also lost a search and destroy convincingly. Both hard points were close, but it had 5-man rotations where they were hitting old scrap time. It did not look good for Optic. My biggest thing for this Optic team, I don't want to be too negative about them, is I think, again, if they pull out a double AR setup with Dashy and what would likely be Slasher on the second M4, I think this team could do better. But frankly, if JCap is your top performer, you've got problems. And there were a couple of maps where he was their top performer. So Quavo's going to have to step up, or Kenny as you most likely know him, and TJ as well. Going to have to definitely step up. He was by far the worst performer, I think, from the launch weekend when it came out to it. That has to change, and it has to change quickly if they want to start doing better, specifically in the respawn where they are combined 1 and 4 between 5 maps of either domination or respawn. And again, you're dealing with, or hardpunter rather, and you're dealing with Atlanta, who looks perfect in search and destroy. They actually literally are perfect in search and destroy. They have not dropped a round yet in search and destroy, and they also look very, very good as far as what they're able to offer in both the hardpoint and the domination. So I don't feel good about Optic Gaming in this one. I don't think you should either. Sticking with that prediction then, you figure Florida or London will play up against Optic Gaming. Flat out, I've got Optic losing both games. If it was a different opponent, let's say that Optic was playing up against LAG, or if they're playing up against Seattle, maybe there's a potential there. But if they're playing up against London or Florida, I don't feel good about it, flat out. I think those teams are just a little bit too far above what I've been able to see currently from Optic. There's a lot of things they have to work on, and granted, maybe they've worked them all out, but I have a very strong suspicion that they absolutely haven't. So I've got whoever the loser is of London and Florida winning that game in the losers bracket, which of course means that you're dealing with the winners bracket, which is the winner of London or London or Florida going up against Atlanta. I don't think either of those two teams have a chance against Atlanta, flat out. I think Atlanta's just too good. They're just outside that skill caliber. I think if London had maybe one more big star player on the roster, maybe they could make a play. But again, I just don't feel like that's a full 5-man roster that at this current moment can take on the strength that Atlanta is currently finding in the game. Whether you've been watching scrims or you remember back to what they did at Minnesota, this Atlanta team just looks way too dominant. Again, even though it is a positive differential for London in the domination, it still does not look great for them there, and that would have to be what they do, because they're not going to win a search and destroy most likely versus Atlanta, or if they do, it'll be a very close one that they'll have to scrap their way out of. And then they have looked good at hardpoint, but not as good as Atlanta has. So the same kind of story when it comes to Florida. Same other side of the story is that they're even worse at domination. They are technically a little bit better at search, but their hardpoint suffers a little bit. And I just don't think either team has a chance to play up against Atlanta. So you figure you're likely going to get Florida versus London again. The winner of that one will be the second team to get out of the group. And the second time around, but I don't want to give you too much betting advice on this one, but just keep an eye on the AR presence specifically and the entry SMG role specifically. If Dylan's popping off and Havoc isn't, or Pristini isn't, London's going to roll away with this, not once, but probably twice. On the other side, if Florida is starting to look really, really solid with the double AR setup, which I anticipate them using more often than not with Mox and Skies, That's going to open up a lot of space for Frosty to go do Frosty things like he did all last year when it was him kind of playing off on an island by himself. And Havoc and Pristini can do a much better job of working the objective. If the ARs look that they're speaking very well for Florida, and you're not getting the same kind of pressure out of London with Wuskin, for instance, or if Raided's not playing super well, or if Jerd's not doing very well when it comes to entrying in, I think Florida can take not the first, but maybe, and probably I would say with the adjustments, definitely the second. So kind of keep your eye on the first matchup, and that'll give you an idea as far as what I'm looking for. The map pool might not be favoring to either of those teams, but I'm mostly specifically looking at how do the ARs do for both of these squads, and will there be any all-star potential from one of the entry SMGs and from either London or Florida going into it. Let's take a look at the second group. Minnesota and Paris, and you've got Chicago and Toronto. Minnesota-Paris should be a very interesting game. Again, I've got both of them right next to each other in the power rankings, essentially. Minnesota's my number 3, Paris my number 5. A lot of you guys think I've got Minnesota too high, but here's the thing that I love to see from Minnesota was you didn't just see good performances from GodRx or Assault or Silly, but you also had great moments from Alex, incredible moments from Asim, specifically in clutch moments from Asim. He may not have had the sexiest stat lines, but he was making plays when they mattered. That is impressive. Now, my biggest question marks about Paris were, would this team be consistent? So far, they absolutely have been, and Denz has showcased himself to potentially be a top 5 player in the game. Definitely a top 5 AR currently in the game based on the playstyle that Paris has. I know Nameless likes to think they play a little bit too lethargic and slow, but it's working currently with their setup. Plus, you're getting great participation from Luca, Shox, and Zed, as well as, of course, Kismet. So, in this matchup, who do you like? Let's go down the line really quick. Both teams, incredible so far at hardpoint. I think it's a 50-50 split between both of these squads, depending on the maps that they play. Search and Destroy. Both teams kind of middle of the road. Again, I think it could go 50-50. The big difference maker is the domination. Yes, Paris's respawn has looked good, but Minnesota, when they were at Minneapolis playing at the launch weekend, their domination looked very good. It was a 192, 174, 188, 172. That's about a minute worth of dead time there that they had already won the game and locked things up. For Paris, on the other hand, they've had a number of relatively either blowouts or close calls. An 8-point game versus the New York Subliners that they were able to take on Gunrunner, and then they got blown out by Chicago 110-15. Here's the big difference maker, though, for this game. Paris, out of the 6 different dominations they've played, 5 of them have been on Gunrunner. Out of the 6 dominations they've played, they have 5 wins. All of them have been on Gunrunner. If Minnesota's doing their homework, which Brian Saint should have been doing his homework, they will veto Gunrunner. That'll be the veto. Force Paris to play on Hackney Yard, or we haven't seen them play there yet, or force them to play on Petro, where just previously they looked like dog shit versus Chicago. Here's the good news for Minnesota fans. Your 2 domination maps that you played, both were wins, were on Hackney Yard. So as long as you were able to veto out Gunrunner and you've got a decent setup for St. Petro, I've got Minnesota taking this one. And how about this one, all you betting fans? Minnesota's the underdog here. Plus 120 for them to win, minus 180 for them to cover the spread of 2 maps. I like Minnesota as the winner in this one. I've got them taking it in Game 5, the swing map being the domination, or Game 4, depending on who got the first Search and Destroy pick and kind of how those picks worked out. I don't know how that's all going to go, but generally speaking, I like Minnesota here. Now, here's the only difference maker is that Paris is more versatile across their hard points. The only hard point that they have not found a victory on yet is St. Petro, which the last time we saw Minnesota play it was against LAG, and they weren't ready to play St. Petro. So Paris is a little bit more well-versed, more experienced when it comes to playing across the entire hardpoint map pool, but I don't know if it's going to make a difference. If you just get Minnesota one of their picks, they get one of their search picks, and they win the domination, I think they win it in at least, at the longest, 5. So that brings us to Chicago, Toronto. Again, I don't think it's even worth tuning into this one. It's going to be pretty convincing, I imagine, for Chicago. This team has been looking incredible lately, not just in what they've been able to do on Respawn, but they got better at Search and Destroy. That's the scariest thing when you go up against a Toronto team who has not looked good in Hardpoint, not looked good in Domination, and the only solid game mode you had against Chicago going into it was the Search and Destroy. So I think you feel pretty fickle about Toronto going into this one. I don't have them getting out of it. So that would put Minnesota and Chicago against each other and Toronto-Paris against each other. Now for Toronto-Paris, these guys have played once before. It was at London, and it was a pretty convincing 3-1 for Paris. I have it going at least the same again. Toronto's the team that doesn't win a match coming out of this bracket. In the winner's bracket, then you've got Minnesota versus Chicago. I don't really like Minnesota versus Chicago, mostly because, again, Minnesota has been a little bit one-tracked as far as what they play. Chicago has been a little bit all over the board, with the exception of not really touching Ramaza for the hard point specifically. So that's my biggest kind of concern, although there is some consideration here because Chicago has definitively liked playing on Hackney Yard more than any other map. Maybe not, because the last 2 wins that they had were on St. Petro and they were definitive, but their opening 4 maps on domination were played on Hackney Yard, which is all we've seen Minnesota play on so far. So you figure that Chicago hard vetoes out Gunrunner in one way or another. We're either going to get a St. Petro or a Hackney Yard, both of which I think are going to be pretty comfortable for Chicago, and that's scary if you're a Minnesota Rocker fan. So I've got Chicago taking this one probably 3-1, and that would leave Minnesota playing up against one more time Paris. And again, I think the strengths still lie in Minnesota's corner. I've got them getting out of that one and getting out of the pool to the playoff. All in all, it's hard to kind of speculate on predictions from here. I've got Atlanta taking the entire thing. I think you eventually see Atlanta play Chicago in the end. And based on what I've seen in scrims so far, I don't think Atlanta's going to be stopped. They might get a little bit of a dent in the armor here. Maybe they lose a map. Maybe they lose 2 against Chicago. But I can't see them losing 3. Not when they've got the ability to make picks happen in their favor. It's going to be a good series, though. I think it's going to be Atlanta-Chicago in the end. I've got Chicago beating Minnesota. I got Atlanta beating London or Florida, whoever comes out of the pool. So it's going to be likely Atlanta versus Chicago, and I've got Atlanta taking it 3-1, 3-2, depending on how things go with the picks and bans. So that's going to be the video here for you guys. A little bit more long-winded than I like to do with these style of prediction videos, so let me know in the comments below. Do you like me going in this much depth? Do you want a little bit shorter? Do you want to see more, see less? Let me know what you guys think. And of course, I'll catch you for the daily recaps live from Atlanta. If you're down there, make sure you hit me up on Twitter with those videos coming up as well. I don't know where I'm going with this little sign off, so we're just going to do it, kill it, have a nice time. We'll hopefully see you guys in Atlanta, or we'll catch you guys on the channel with recap videos. Until then, hope you keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.